Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and man, I really appreciate you guys taking some time to watch the video and subscribing to the channel and supporting the channel. Definitely grateful for that. And guys, got a good tip for you guys today. We're going to talk about crankbait fishing as far as what is causing you to lose fish on a crankbait, and a couple different things that you can do to increase your odds of getting more fish in the boat. And also, I want to show you one aspect of a crankbait as far as how the hooks are positioned on a crankbait that has so much to do with your ability to catch and land fish on this particular lure category. So we're going to get into that in the video. Real quick, guys, just a couple of the daily housekeeping tips. I want to remind you, if you like the content here on Intuitive Angling and you want to support the channel, best way you can do that is just checking out the links in the description. We got stuff in there like our Fish the Moment Lake Map breakdowns, our new Solar Bat Signature Series sunglasses, on the water lessons. Great way to support the channel if you want to use those links. So I'll put that all here in the description of the video. Okay, guys, specifically what I want to talk about today are crankbaits that are hitting the bottom or hitting some type of an object on it, which are most crankbaits out there. And I want to show you one design element that is just ingenious that Megabass puts on their Megabass S crank line. And I'm explaining to you a little bit about why this is important and some things you can do to actually, even if you use a crankbait that doesn't have this feature, some things you can do to help that out. Now, pay close attention to this, guys. Look at the hook hanger right here. I can show you. See where the hook hanger is positioned on this Megabass S crank? It's on top of the back right here. And here's another square bill. I think this is either a Lucky Craft or a Lucky Strike. And look at the hook hanger, how it's positioned here. It's positioned straight out the back, which this is how most crankbaits are right here. So here's the difference in the two that you have right here. Now, even though this does not seem like a big deal, it's huge, because what happens is when this bait is running through the water, when you're reeling through the water like this, the position of that hook eye causes that hook to ride up into this position, lifting it above this position right here. Now, the reason this is so critical on this bait and any crankbait is when a fish hits a crankbait, 95% of the time, when you're bouncing a crankbait like on rocky bottoms or something like that, or knocking it off it, a fish is attacking that crankbait from the top or the side like that. Fish are very rarely coming up like this to hit a crankbait. You just don't catch many crankbait fish unless you're hitting something. So a lot of times, if this bait is like digging across the bottom like that, the fish will come up and nail it from the top and like pin it into the mud or the dirt like that. And you simply don't get the hook in their mouth very good, simply because the angle of the fish, the way it hits the bait. And if you've got a hook that's positioned like that, that's sticking up like that, like on this Megabass here, it increases your odds tremendously on landing that fish. This is one of the most innovative features that gets overlooked that Megabass has right here. Just another reason that, you know, they're sort of the, you know, set the bar for other lure companies out there. But here's some things you can do, even if you have a crankbait like this that doesn't have it, a couple of different things you can do to increase your odds of landing a fish on a crankbait. There's a couple different elements to this, and believe me, guys, I have learned the hard way with this. It's because you guys have watched the videos, you know I talk about how frustrating it is to lose fish, and I give you guys some stories about it. First thing you have to remember before I get into some actual practical tips, what you can learn, is that so much of landing fish, as far as losing them or getting into the boat, it's simply the way the fish bite the lure. That is a variable that you have no control over. You don't have any control on how the fish is positioned to attack that lure. Now, sometimes if you throw it next to an object or something, yeah, you can sort of guess where the fish is positioned and attacking that lure. But a lot of times, if you've watched a bass in a clear water environment, they come from all different directions to get it. I mean, literally all different directions. And when you're talking about a lure that has a mass like a crankbait there's a lot on this bait for them not to get, as far as not to get hooks in them. So if you're losing fish on a crankbait, don't get too frustrated a lot of times if you've done everything right that we're going to talk about here in a second, because sometimes it's just the way the fish hit the bait. Sometimes they nip at it. Sometimes they hit it with their mouth shut. Sometimes they swat at it. Sometimes they get it in their mouth and blow it out. you don't have any control of that. But what you do have control of is like the crankbaits you can use on how the hook eyes are positioned, the type of hook, the hook set, and how you fight the fish, and your rod, and all that type of setup. When you're fishing crankbaits, one of the things that you have to remember with that is there's a tendency when you get a bite on a crankbait, a lot of people just sort of start reeling a little bit and they don't put a lot of pressure on it. One of the things that I've noticed about when I lose a lot of fish on a crankbait is I'll cast it out there and I'm reeling and I get a strike, and sometimes with the crankbait, you guys know when you get a strike, it doesn't feel like too much and it's heavy or something like that. So a lot of times you'll just pull back a little bit and reel, and then you know you got a fish on, you just start reeling. You have got to set the hook on a crankbait the same way that you would with a jig a lot of times. And I don't mean like once you know the fish hit crankbait, you reel back and set the hook. I'm talking about where you're reeling and all of a sudden one hits your crankbait. Put a significant amount of reeling speed on your reel and pull back hard like that, and really reel fast like that. It's really important to reel fast for about 10 or 15 cranks to get that penetration of that hook in that fish's mouth, especially if they're clamped down on that crankbait. So many times, and I'm even guilty of it myself, is I just think since there's a big old set of treble hooks that I'm just gonna start reeling and they're gonna hook themselves. So the main point, guys, is be a little bit more aggressive on the first 10 seconds of the fight. Just reel hard and pull hard, get that fish coming to the boat really fast to try to penetrate that hook. That's a big part of it there. The next thing with it is once you have that fish closer to the boat, and at this time, you don't really know how the fish is hooked. Unless the fish jumps out there and you can't see the bait at all, or sometimes you can see the whole bait and it's just hanging on by an end. A lot of times you don't know how that fish is hooked. So you have to assume when you're fighting that fish, always assume that the fish is not hooked very well. And what you have to do is once you get that fish to the boat where you lose control of it, and when I'm talking about losing control, I'm talking about you have control over the fish for a certain distance until that fish decides to turn its head. And this is also based upon the size of the fish. The larger the fish, the more power they're going to have with it. But you lose control of the fish once he turns his head. And at that time, you don't know what's going on as far as its hook. So you have to assume it's not hooked very good. And that is when you put minimum pressure on it. And how you put minimum pressure is once that fish turns his head or reverses directions, push your thumb bar on your reel and just hold that thumb bar and let that fish do what it wants. And if it makes a run, take some of the tension off your thumb bar and let that fish have some line. Don't ever let it use the drag. Never use the drag on a bait casting reel. Always use your thumb bar because you can control the tension. And then once you work the fish to the boat a little bit and you see how the fish is hooked, then you can adjust your pressure that you put on it with that. The next thing with that is on a crankbait is you got to have the right action of rod for the most part. Now there's a little bit of disagreement on this debate here, but I have found that a softer tipped rod, a longer rod with a softer tip is going to land you more fish. I like at least a 7-foot rod all the time for any crankbait fishing I'm doing. And I like some type of a medium tip. The butt section, as far as the stiffness, doesn't matter as much, but you need to have that tip on there with some type of a medium action, because the medium action does a couple different things. It's like when you're reeling that crankbait and that fish comes up, say that fish comes up and it doesn't bite the bait, but it inhales it and it brings that bait back into that fish's mouth, because when a big fish moves water through its gills, it will actually create a suction. And even though they don't bite at lure, they open their mouth, they flare their gills, it creates suction, and it brings that bait into their mouth. Now, if you're using a medium tip rod and you get that strike, and a lot of times you'll never know that you got the strike. It's almost like you may feel something like the vibration just got a little bit duller, but you don't feel the strike. That medium tip will flex just enough when that fish sucks that bait in to allow that bait to get sucked in. Just even if it's like a 1/4 of an inch, it makes a huge difference. So the medium tip will allow you to do that. And as well, once you're fighting that fish at the boat and that fish is surging and making runs, that medium tip, the bend on it will be more forgiving, and you're a lot less likely to lose that fish if it's barely hooked with there. But anyway, guys, one of the things I'd recommend, and like I said, you guys know I'm with Megabass, so this is like, I'm just showing you how great the product is. The position of this hook hanger on the bait will really add up to a lot more fish. I'll put the link in the description, guys, at Baitworks if you guys want to try some of these and just see for yourself on that. But main thing, guys, is once you've done everything, once you've got the right, setup with that rod, fighting the bait, fighting the fish the right, that's all you can do. Don't sweat it too much if you lose the fish. That's just part of fishing. That's going to happen with that, and not a lot you can do. So also, one more thing with it, guys, is when you're selecting your hooks, it's really important not to have a hook large enough that's going to cross the hooks here, because a lot of times when you cast that bait out there, if you put too big of oversized hooks on it, the hooks are going to cross like that and get hung up on each other. And a lot of times that bait will be working and you don't know it, and that fish will hit it with the hooks crossed, and you'll never get that fish in. So always, even if you're upgrading your hooks, always make sure that they have the right shank length on them to where they don't hang and hook each other like that. It really makes a big difference as far as maximizing your efficiency out there. So hope it helps out, guys. We'll talk later.